Well, 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 look who's back for more punishment. I'm guessing your last mix still sounded like a battle between pots and pans in a narrow alley. Time for a reality check. We're about to tackle gain staging and volume balancing because... Cutting straight to the chase, you're here because your mixes are a far cry from that polished metal masterpiece you've been dreaming of. Instead, it's a sonic mudslide. But guess what? The magic starts way before you even think about touching an EQ or compressor. It's all about gain staging and the static mix. Brace yourselves, because I'm actually going to make you good at this. Let's kick things off with the truth bomb. Your static mix is the bedrock of everything that follows. Before we even whisper EQ or compression, we are dialing in those relative levels and getting our panning just right. This isn't just busy work, it's setting us up for success. And yeah, I'll get into some ballpark figures for each element of the mix soon, but remember, these are just mere starting points. The real magic happens when you adapt these to the song's tempo and its unique demands. Now, this is also the perfect time to get cozy with some reference tracks you know by heart. They're not just good tunes, they're your mixing compass, guiding you to sonic excellence. Now about normalization. Personally, I get all my tracks to a standard level before doing anything else. It's like setting the stage before the actors come on. Though I've got my preferences, I recommend normalizing all your tracks to 0 initially, and then manually setting the levels by hand, with either your fader or an input trim plugin. It's a hands-on approach that helps you develop a keen sense for where each element belongs in the mix. Alright guys, I'm in the DAW. Studio One lets me select everything, and then I can just normalize everything to 0 with the click of a button. Now everything is normalized to 0. Let's take a quick listen. Holy crap, we're clipping everywhere and everything is unbalanced. Let's go ahead and use our faders to set the levels of everything else. And there you go. In less than 5 minutes, I have set the relative levels and static mixed my mix. Let's take a quick listen to how it sounds. Sounds pretty good. Everything's in check. All the levels are balanced, our panning's on point, and our master bus isn't clipping. Now, the method I just showed you strictly involves using the faders to set the gain stage and static mix, after you normalize everything to 0. However, I like to use normalization to set each individual element of the mix to a specific level. Let's go ahead and start with the drums. I find that kick and snare work best at -6 dB. Let's go ahead and select the kick and snare and hit normalize to -6 dB. I've also found that bottom snare mics work about half the volume as the top snare mic, so I'm going to set my bottom snare mic to -12. Tom mics as well, they also get the -12 dB treatment. When it comes to hi-hat, ride, and China mics, or individual spot mics, I tend to have them hover around -18. When it comes to overheads, depending on the peaks in the snare, I'm going to go ahead and set that to -12 or -15. When it comes to room mics, -21. Alright, moving on to bass and guitars. Here's where the genre dictates the approach. For those slower, lumbering metal tracks, start with the bass. I usually set it at minus 18 to minus 15 dB. In this case, since it's a faster metal track, I'm going to go ahead and start at minus 18. For rhythm guitars, regardless of the genre, I always set them at minus 12. However, I did just break my own rule here. When I usually deal with speedier songs, I bring up the guitars first set at that minus 12 dB for the rhythm guitars. Then and only then do I bring in the bass back in, adjusting it enough just to complete the guitar's low end. This isn't just a set it and forget it deal, however. After setting my initial levels, I fine-tune the bass and guitars with the trim plugin or with the fader, ensuring that the bass low end is merging perfectly well with the guitar low end. After the instrumental melee has been set, it's time to parade our vocal champions into the arena. This isn't a mere introduction, it's a coronation. The lead vocals need to slice through the dense metal fabric with precision and authority. Here's how we arm them. Lead vocals are initially brought in with the might of their presence felt between minus 6 and minus 12 dB. I have 4 main vocal tracks here, which I'll go ahead and set at minus 12 dB. The reason is that we have a lot of vocal layers, and all that extra buildup is going to add increased volume. Our backup vocals are the unsung heroes providing depth and support to the center lead tracks, typically set minus 6 dB under the center track. The role isn't to overshadow, but to uplift, enhancing the lead center track without becoming a distraction. Think of them as the archers supporting the infantry, essential yet discreet. I've highlighted my backup vocals here, and I'm going to set them to minus 18. Remember, your vocals should command the mix and not get lost in the fray. Now that we set our static mix using normalization levels for each individual element of the mix, let's take a listen to how it sounds. And there you have it. Our mix is perfectly balanced without any clipping. The advantages of doing it this way versus just normalizing everything to 0 and then setting the levels with the faders is that your faders get to stay at 0, making automation much easier in the later stages of the mix. When it comes to those auxiliary elements, think ambient tracks, subtle effects, maybe some symphonic choirs and the like. I start them off normalized around minus 12. But the real art comes in when I start to lower the fader and dialing in the static level by hand. These elements aren't meant to steal the show, they're meant to enhance and to add depth and texture that you rather feel than overly notice. Unless, of course, the band has other ideas. It's about finesse and adding layers that enrich the mix and fill in the gaps without overwhelming. Let's address a common beast in the mix, dynamic range, especially with tricky sources like bass DI tracks and raw vocals. If you're finding it a Herculean task to get these elements to sit nicely in your mix because they're bouncing all over the place, compression is your best friend here. Use it wisely to tame those wild dynamics, narrowing down the dynamic range so you can achieve a more consistent level across the board. Don't be afraid of squashing the life out of your tracks, reining them in where they contribute to the mix in a balanced, harmonious way. Compression, when used correctly, can be the glue that holds your dynamic elements in check, allowing you to set the relative level that makes everything play nice together. Let's use our main center vocal track as an example of dynamic range that's out of control. As you can hear, the first half of that phrase is completely lower in level than the second half, making it a little bit more difficult to set the relative level of your vocals. Let's go ahead and use a simple compressor to get the vocals to sit at a much more even level across the phrase, allowing us to set the relative level much more easier. Here's a simple compressor that allows me to do that. I'm going to set the output stage of the gain to where I would like my vocal to sit. In this case, I'm going to hit minus 12. And then I'm going to bring down the compression until I'm getting a relative level and not seeing any spikes in the peaks. Perfect. And as you can see here, when the vocal phrase is playing, you'll see that it's hovering around minus 12 almost consistently. Our vocal's dynamic range is now perfectly balanced, and now we can set the relative gain staging and static mix of the vocal. And that's a wrap, guys. You've gone from producing noise pollution to potentially respectable metal mixes. Keep applying these tips, and who knows, you might just stop being a total embarrassment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and throw your best insults my way in the comments. Peace out.